everyone, welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, coming at you with a new video tonight. I might look a little bit exhausted because I just recorded this whole video, which is like a 40-minute long video, and then only to find that the upload, or the recording messed up, and I have to redo the entire thing over again. So it's 40 minutes. It's like, okay, take two, let's do the whole thing again. So, dear God, let's see if we can get through this and make it better than it was the first time. We're talking again about Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell is one of my most emailed subjects, which is to say, the subjects I get emailed about the most is, among other things, it's how do I contact deceased loved ones after they cross over. Topical, specific questions about things on this show or in the books. Or very frequently, I just heard a lecture or read a book by an author named Tom Campbell. Now I'm filled with anxiety because he tells people that our deceased loved ones are not accessible after we cross over. They have transitioned into something far beyond whatever it is that they once were. So I've touched on this subject before, and I made an article even on the Afterlife Topics website, I think it was sometime last year, outlining some of my theories about where Tom gets these ideas from. But it happened again, so we have a patron here, actually Sunday, who made a post on the group, which I'm going to read off, because like many people before her, she discovered Tom Campbell's work and it brought her full of anxiety, which is understandable because these concepts would, I think, give anybody who has, a pulse, who actually, has loved ones and, participates in a social and productive way in society, would, I think, give anybody anxiety. Although it doesn't seem to faze the diehard fans of Tom Campbell, who've kind of made these ideas into a little bit of a religion, especially on certain forums where if you question any of this stuff, you get chased out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this post by our member of the group here who is discussing this, and then I'm going to go into my interpretations a little bit more detailed than before about why I think these concepts are not true, why I think that this is an erroneous idea from start to finish, although there's elements of the truth mixed in. Like there's real metaphysical concepts I think many of us can agree with based on metaphysical and mystical concepts, or things that make sense. So it's kind of like the truth mixed in with just enough fiction in just the right places that can really kind of mess up our perception of how this whole thing works. Before we go further, you're watching Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, where we tackle these kinds of issues. If you want to see these conversations continue, hit that subscribe button, or like the video, share the video. All of that helps keep things going. Or become a patron, work with me personally. All that is in the description down below or the left side of the box. Alright, so to continue. So here is the question. So yet another person getting anxiety from Tom Campbell, which again, let me just preface it real quick by saying Tom Campbell seems like a really nice guy. He has some really good videos on YouTube, even talking about love and our core essence of love and what it means and how it's being brought forward right now during the viral crisis that the world is in. And he says nice things, and I don't mind the guy. He came out of the Monroe Institute era along with others like Bullman and Robert Monroe himself. The first materials I was introduced to in regard to out-of-body experiences and things like that. I've always felt a little bit unsure about some of the major philosophies and ideas that came out of that historical circle of people who brought OBEs and things to the forefront of people's knowledge. And Tom Campbell, with his book My Big Toe, really reinforced that for me, because I don't, again, it's like truth mixed with fiction for me. I think that you can't try to understand the other side and then take spirit communication out of the equation. You have to include from the lion's mouth what things are like over there. And it's very difficult to take whatever certain number of mystical experiences and extrapolate all of reality based upon that to create a so-called theory of everything, which I don't think it works. So, and it ends up creating all this anxiety, and so many people who have issues like this who end up writing to me and sometimes even getting involved in this community specifically because they felt heartbroken because they were involved in the Campbell stuff. So Sunday says, so I have a question if you've ever heard about Tom Campbell. He says, when we pass away, almost immediately we are met by our loved ones, but they're not, quote, real. The larger consciousness system pretends that they're real to make us more comfortable, and then pretty soon we'll start forgetting our real life and who we were, just like we forget a dream. There's so much I can say real quick, and I'll extrapolate more later, but you don't forget stuff, okay? You don't have a brain that forgets things. Experience is a universal constant, so you don't forget loved ones. That by itself is just, it's not the way reality seems to actually work. You don't like love someone and care about them, and then you pass away and it's like, ooh, shiny object, I'm now some much bigger thing and I don't care about anything in my life anymore. That's not what spirits tell us. That's never been reported by anybody, and it's the opposite of the message of most near-death experiences that talk about how love is the thing that glues people beyond dimensions and everything. So right away, she's paraphrasing Tom, but we can see how these ideas really they really go off the mark. Just like we forget a dream. He says, when we wake up after passing away, we'll just remember who we truly are, our higher self, basically, at which point we start planning our next incarnation. Very reincarnation-centric, isn't it? I think it dates back to certain Eastern religious influences on some people in the Monroe Institute, that everything is always about reincarnation, which it doesn't have to be, But we know we have that element in here as well. I think while I do this, I'm even going to check to make sure that it's recording, because last time, okay, we are recording, I think, so we're okay. Okay. So Sunday continues. If that's true, then who are the mediums getting in contact? And when Cyrus and Uragan astral project, who are they meeting in the astral realm? When you're talking to your loved ones, who are you talking to then? So he's saying that our loved ones are all these facsimile illusions on the other side. They're not the real ones. That basically God is playing dress up and pretending to be our loved ones. It seems like a very inefficient use of God's time. Which of course time is not an issue, but we're basically projecting and creating our loved ones based upon sort of like the Akashic Database. Like we're just pulling these people out and fulfilling our superficial wants and needs by creating these illusionary constructs, which of course goes against what every medium says. It goes against ADC experiences and so much that we cover on this channel, so much that we cover in all the research. And it's kind of just sweeping all of that under the carpet. These two ideas don't mesh. It's why fervent supporters of the Tom Campbell models of reality often just deny the existence of ADC contacts, because it doesn't mesh with their belief system, so you get that classic cognitive dissonance. Tom Campbell insists that the larger consciousness system, also known as God, basically pretends for our benefit to have our loved ones around because that's what we need to hear, so we are soothed and not afraid when we cross over. So it's like this big smoke and mirror sideshow, right? It's such a bizarre theory to me. Until we can forget our last life and be ready to start the experience over again. Why? Why did you want to forget the last life? The whole point is not to forget things, to create experience, improve your character, become the representation of God again in a new individual body, to be perfected as close as you can through experience and learning about love. And it's like basic stuff that we learn about in NDEs, for crying out loud. Sunday concludes, so that seems like such a cruel, systematic way that everyone is just being hoaxed or tricked. Tom Campbell, Uragan, and Cyrus all agree that love is the purpose and point of everything, but why would this LCS system care about love if it's just a computer? Okay, so now I'm going to actually skip ahead to a guy in the comments who agrees with Tom Campbell. My response to Tom and this guy, because I promised I'd make a video specifically about that, and I've probably touched on these topics before, but I'm gonna jump into that. If we can just find him real quick. So we have guy Allen. He says, Our loved ones hang around in the astral for a while, but not indefinitely. And so I'm gonna rebut this thing as we go along. Grandma isn't hanging around in limbo for 75 years waiting for little Jimmy to finally pass on from natural old age. Now, there's many ways that I can pick this idea apart. And I don't even know where to begin, but basically, like what Alan is doing, and also what Tom Campbell has done in his My Big Toe, and all of this work is they're discounting the non-linear nature of time and space, one of the most fundamental things about higher dimensional existence that we cover, and that's very well documented. So let's pick apart these sentences here. Alan says, our loved ones hang around in the astral for a while, but not indefinitely. Grandma is hanging around in limbo for 75 years waiting for little Jimmy to finally pass on from natural old age. Okay, first of all, why would Grandma be unable to? We know that there is no such thing as a linear space. What that means is that you can go anywhere you want with a split-second thought on the other side. You can get in your astral car and drive 1,000 kilometers, and it takes a long time, or you can just think it and you're there. This also includes going between realms of existence, as long as it's the same frequency. Going between frequencies seems more complicated, but it does seem to be very much easier to go down in frequency. So if you're on a higher frequency, you can go lower, lower, lower. But you have to do some kind of inner work, or you have to ascend in a way to be able to go from a middle frequency to a higher frequency, for example. But going down seems to be no problem. So let's say Grandma has moved on, and now she's part of the higher self Grandma, and she's a much more powerful, all-knowing, ancient version of who she once was. What's stopping her from visiting Jimmy on that lower astral level? Jimmy is literally just a thought away. Let's say Grandma is more attuned to one of her incarnations where Grandma was, I don't know, a Roman general, right? So now you have, instead of Grandma Bertha, you have General Julius or something. So, all General Julius has to do is think for a second, and he again assumes the form of Grandma Bertha, and can just immediately transport him, her, don't know what pronoun to use, him itself to Jimmy, and immediately all the memory of her life as Grandma Bertha is right back to the surface, because unlike what was alluded to by Tom Campbell, we don't lose our memories. It's all there. It's permanent. It's a permanent thing. We lose our memories on this side. Memories are not something that, we don't have some kind of astral dementia where we forget people. Forgetting is something that happens on this side, not on that side. So this premise that Alan here is putting out is right away, in my opinion, totally bogus. It's missing out on these prime concepts, not only of basically the nature of space, but also how consciousness operates on that side, and how we can go anywhere we want. So why does he say astral is limbo? Why would it be limbo? So the astral realm, let's say it's it can range in spectrum from grungy and very Earth-like to glorious crystal castles and like fantasy art paintings and things like that. And why do we turn our noses up at that and say, ooh, who wants to hang around there for 75 years? These are human. We're human mortals turning our noses up at realms beyond most people's comprehension. If you got to experience the vibrancy and beauty and grandeur, the spectacle of even basic higher dimensional planes of existence, you wouldn't be saying, well, to become truly spiritually superior, we must immediately go beyond the astral plane and go back to source consciousness. This is just religion talking. If you're on the astral world, you're not in limbo, you're not even barely thinking about the linear progression of time. As Robbie Smith says in the comment down below, cites Leslie Flint, spirit communication, like from a guy killed in the Cromwellian War from 400 years prior. So there's spirit people of all ages. I even heard through some spirit sources about Neanderthal men on that side who are ancient and wise because their linear time age is like 100,000 plus years old. So they're like, by definition, the wisest of the sort of human civilization people because they date back the oldest, right? So it wouldn't be in some kind of astral limbo. That doesn't even make any sense to me. Grandma has her own direction and needs perhaps to reincarnate after just 10 years, for example. I agree that our loved ones are basically projections out of our own memories. You know, I just couldn't disagree with this guy more. And, you know, there's again that focus on reincarnation. Why is there such a focus on reincarnation? What if grandma doesn't want to reincarnate? Number two, there's a fundamental misunderstanding about reincarnation. What we know from pretty good sources is that reincarnation involves basically the higher self. Let's say the higher self has 30 happy avatars that it uses. And these avatars are in different positions, different realms, different planets, different experiences, and it's all kind of going back into the singular mind that is that higher self, right? And that's the singular consciousness of all of them. Reincarnation, from as far as we know from pretty good sources, is simply when that higher self decides to branch off and poop out another avatar and decide, hey, I want to go be a, I want to go see what it's like to live in Japan. And so, suddenly it creates a baby in Japan. Well, let's say grandma does that, and grandma's still grandma living on that side, even if grandma is reincarnated, because again, these guys, they don't understand the non-linear nature of time and space. You can be in many places at once. There's nothing holding anyone back from that consciousness. Can be anywhere it wants to be at any time and expand itself. More than 30, probably a lot bigger number than that. So there's no reason, again, that even if grandma is reincarnated, that grandma cannot just still meet up with Jimmy. So it's such a strange example to me. So these are fundamentally wrong concepts, but it's okay because it's a confusing subject. So I totally get why these guys are confused, but it doesn't line up with the more modern research and examinations of these subjects. And so holding on so tightly to this theory, I mean, it's just like there's something very antisocial about it. It's almost like I know Bullman's not a big fan of his family members. He wants to just transcend beyond them when he crosses over. It's this kind of antisocial streak that came out of all these guys from the Monroe Institute. They don't really want the idea of meeting our deceased loved ones, right? So it almost seems like there's a little bit of a bias projection happening here. And my next sort of final point to cap off my rebuttal of these theories is that it's the same thing I mentioned in the article on the website, on afterlifetopics.com, that while Tom is right that we can create anything through that Akashic database, it's very apparent if an individual's soul is manufactured or it's not really the soul that we're in communication with. When you're having a lucid dream, then you can create your loved ones in that lucid dream. And then you'll find that they're like paper tigers. They're thin. They're hollow. They don't have the actual personalities of your loved ones. They're being operated by your own mind. So they are illusions. I don't trust any experience unless I physically feel myself leaving my body. Without physically leaving my body, then I can't classify it as having been an OBE. I've had lucid dreams where if I interpreted those lucid dreams literally, I might have some impression like Tom's had, where maybe my loved ones are not really my loved ones because I didn't get the sense that is what they were, because they weren't. They were manifestations of my own consciousness creating them. Maybe Tom had a bunch of non-astral lucid dreams or psychedelic experiences, and then he met these thought form creations that he made that were impersonating deceased loved ones, and then he drew an incorrect conclusion from that. I think that could be what was going on. That's my response to this. Now I'm going to jump into Uragan's response. Uragan, of course, is one of the great out-of-body experience authors, friend of Tom Campbell's, and he put in his sort of rebuttal as well toward this idea. I hope this is the nail in the coffin for this theory, but it's not, because this stuff's going to be around long after long after Tom is gone, and Tom is disappointed finding out that he's that there's still real people populating an astral dimension or any level of existence, right? That the human experience goes on. All these ideas are still going to be debated, and so I don't think that this is going to finalize anything, especially on this micro channel with very few subscribers. But I think that this is the best point I've seen in response to all of this. And so Uragan kind of closes this down. Again, a friend of Tom's, and a very prolific out-of-body author. It's a guy who's documented realms of existence far beyond anything I have experienced, higher planes of existence, really the pinnacle of it. And his work I greatly admire, and also falls in line with Tom's experiences, with William Bullman's experiences, but there's a distinct difference in terms of the interpretation of reality that comes out of it, and that's what Uragan highlights. So I'm going to try to read off Uragan's response. Uragan says, I met Tom personally on 2 occasions, and we discussed this point at length in our hotel over breakfast. He listened to my argument and conceded that the individual will probably persist encased by this LCS, this is Tom's vocabulary, larger consciousness system. But he didn't sound convinced. He had to concede that I had a powerful argument in tandem to what other mediums and explorers testify. So that's the thing. Lots of people testify against this theory as being true, but Tom, the people who hold a kind of religious view about this, they are very stubborn and they dismiss a lot of that, sometimes even acting like the closed-minded skeptics, saying, well, none of that can be real because it doesn't fit my pre-existing beliefs. He had to concede, okay, so let me back up. Tom holds dear to his virtual reality concept, where the LCS accounts for manifestation by providing data taken from the universal database, which he thinks provides the virtual manifestation of the deceased responding to the loved one's desire who were left behind. And I'll just add to it, as far as I can tell from all my experience and research, you can't manifest an individual sovereign soul using like the Akashic Database. You can't, because that would interfere with their free will. You can't summon a living creature, because when you do, you create a thought form, okay? So when you try to summon a living creature, you create a creature that is hooked up in part of your own consciousness, so it's not the sovereign individual. So when you interact with a sovereign individual on the other side who is not attached to your own mind, then it's clear that it's not being summoned from your own mind. In principle, I cannot argue with the broader concept of this kind of virtual reality, having explored in detail my book, Multidimensional Man, how things manifest on the astral level. I identified 5 manifestation forces which take information directly from the universal data field, which some people refer to as Akashic. And it's basically magic. Okay, so all the cliches about, I don't know, fantasy stories, someone's like, I want a ham sandwich, and poof, a ham sandwich appears. Well, all that stuff, conjuration, it's real on that side, because it's basically using your mind to tap into a database. And Uragan explains, during OBEs, I investigated whether a supercar like a Lamborghini, that's a Lamborghini Diablo, on the astral plane needed an engine, as it was clearly thought-driven, or so I thought. The fact is, looking under the astral hood of the Lamborghini, you'll find a 6.5-liter 12-cylinder engine, all in glorious detail and fully functional, no part missing. Studying the paintwork close up, you may even find minor erosion like micro scratch marks, probably because you summoned the car came from a database of collective consciousness, which may have came from someone's driveway. Like you're literally yanking a Lamborghini from somebody's driveway when you're manifesting it. Like you set the intention, and the universal sort of database of all knowledge pulls something out of it. My mind was boggled when I discovered how much detail this LCS, or you could say Akashic Database, supplies for its manifestations. Because it's just like everything is like computer code. Everything, this microphone, everything is recorded, and you can just think about it and it pops up instantly, including all the details of the object, okay? Uragan continues. So it is easy to see how Tom concluded that the same level of detail is provided to the projection we invest on our loved ones. But just the idea that you can create your loved one I think it's absurd. Because, when you interact with a thought form, you don't feel their consciousness, you don't feel their soul, you don't feel their sovereign personalities. That's the big difference again. So, anyone I think who should have experience on a social level, I don't know, maybe Tom doesn't, I don't know, should be able to tell the difference between a thought form and a real person. He postulates the existence of us as being free will awareness units, which at least to me simply means humans, us being dead and still interacting as individuals later on in the astral plane. So Tom seems to discriminate between these two categories of manifestation. One virtual, a projection, or in his virtual reality interpretation, like an NPC, non-player character, as in computer games. He often uses the World of Warcraft game to illustrate his virtual reality theory. Oh God. This isn't cringy enough. Of all the games that Tom has to reference, it has to be World of Warcraft. We all know EverQuest is superior to World of Warcraft. On the other hand, he accommodates also the aspect of the free will awareness unit, us as individuals who persist after demise. So some real, some projection driven by the data system. It was on this understanding that we parted company after breakfast. It all boils down to how to define the incredible, complex reality of the afterlife state, which consists of a database-driven reality where things can manifest instantly as a matter of intent or even expectation, and also the persistence of earthly incarnation once the gross material body has been discarded, held together by the individual occupying it. Basically reminds me of a couple places I've seen during astral trips where they're like, no magic allowed. Magic being using the Akashic Database to conjure an item out of the air. Or perform any other number of feats, which I think is most accurately reflected in our pop culture, in any fantasy, fairy tale, whatever it may be, as a magical ability. It can be disruptive, if you're enjoying dinner at a nice restaurant and someone's pulling cats out of the air, or creating random stuff everywhere, right? There's literally, in my experiences, regulations sometimes against doing that. Other astral travelers, even ones I've read stories about on Reddit, have encountered similar restrictions in place. It's funny. And I think that is a clue about how these relationships intertwine. It's a higher dimensional property where you can use your consciousness, and it's not always quite as instantaneous. Sometimes you actually have to train your consciousness and your mind to create a Lamborghini, for example. So it's not always even instantaneous, but we gain access to that ability on the other side. It doesn't mean that our loved ones are illusions created by that ability. So it's proverbially jumping the shark, as they say, going overboard with something. And that's really what this is. Uragan finishes, for us down here, Cyrus, myself, Marcus Lang, the medium, and many others, we simply see individuals progressing minus their gross material bodies, free from the constraints of having to accommodate our real observation and experience into a scientific theory, hell-bent on explaining everything, as in Tom's My Big Toe. I've always made it clear, as much as we would like, there can be no such thing as a theory of everything, which I agree with. because theory only goes that far. It does not stretch into the much larger reality of creation, which goes beyond the human intellect, which is a late acquisition in our evolutionary development as a human species. It is clear that Tom is trying to see everything in terms of his MBT, and my big toe theory. And in a way, he tries to make it fit as best he can, which will leave many of us unsatisfied, I would add brokenhearted, or full of grief, because I think if you're a balanced person and you have loving relationships in your life, you don't want to hear that your loved ones are that you will never be in contact with them again, or that all these linear rules of time and space apply on the other side, and they cannot see you again, or that they forget about you. We know from basic data about that side that those things are not true. That's not the way it works. People hear these things, and they it causes a lot of grief. And Tom, I know he fancies himself as being a guru of enlightenment, and these guys always talk about shedding the ego. Well, holding on to a theory that doesn't account for most people's experiences, metaphysical logic, pretty much basic fundamental elements of an afterlife, then holding on to that theory is something that's being done out of ego, okay? I have ego like most people. I get attached to crap also, and I don't want to let it go. I don't want to set it down because it's like, this is how I think. Until eventually I do start to shift. It just takes a little bit of time. I noticed with friends that I've convinced about things, they resist and they fight, then a year later they're totally on board with it. It's usually a gradual thing. Tom is pretty stuck in this way of thinking. He doesn't seem to be accommodating the real data, and I don't think he's fully aware of just how much influence he has and just how much pain this has caused so many people. I've been amazed again how many emails I get about this subject still. So I think that if you can have healthy relationships with people in this world, then this stuff is not appealing at all. I do think that there's certain people, and I don't want to sound disparaging, I'm just saying that there's certain personality types that are kind of misanthropic, and they don't mind the idea that everyone is some kind of illusion, and that dying means merging into some much higher aspect of existence that is beyond human civilization, beyond civilization in general, beyond the universe, and something else entirely. Because many people just want to escape. They want nothing to do with anything anymore. It's kind of the proverbial angsty teenager. And I think some of that, I see that archetype coming out in Bowman's work, who I respect. I see that coming out in Tom's work, who I respect. Didn't see it as badly in Robert Monroe, but it was kind of there. And I kind of think a lot of these people are reinforcing each other. But I don't think that that's a good way to live life. I think being a misanthrope, maybe the reason you're incarnated is because your higher self doesn't want you to be a misanthrope anymore. So maybe go out and, hug your family members. Maybe, give that relative a call and learn to care and love your people around you and appreciate them and appreciate wanting to be with them again after your crossover. Because that's the main message. Again, NDE is everything about love, holding people together. No one's going to forget anybody. No one's going to not be there when you cross over. And even if grandma has incarnated as a famous basketball player, whatever it may be, grandma is still also going to be grandma too. And if you've had 100 different incarnations, you're all those incarnations, and you're also you. So if you don't like you, start learning to like and appreciate you, because it's what you've created. You'll always have those memories. It'll always be part of you. So enhance it and make it something great. That's my message. Happy quarantine. If you want to get involved, Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics Facebook group, the reddit.com/Afterlife Topics. You can get involved in the private classes, coaching with me, all that kind of stuff in the descriptions. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this video. Tom Campbell issue, your interpretation of it. Thanks for coming along with me. Cross my fingers that this video works now. I'll see you guys next time.